If I can get this to refresh. All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Wilson. As he was saying, today we're going to talk about demystifying CSS3 animations. Maybe you're web developers or something, but maybe you're not an expert on this topic like myself. I've been digging into it for the last couple of months, and it's nice what you can actually do with it. We've all seen some nice animations out there, like dancing robots or bouncy balls, but like they're not always like suitable for our production websites. So today we're gonna be taking a look at some real world animations that you can actually use to enhance your users' experience on their site, on your sites. So animations in the past. If you try animations in the past, maybe you were using something like Adobe Flash, which proved to be something like slow at times. Maybe people overuse it a little bit. Then you had to deal with like plugins, and if you didn't have the right version, it became a mess because you had to go and download and everything. Then you have something like Synchronized Multimedia Integration Language, or SMILE, which is kind of it lets you send like media objects to the client and like coordinate them and make them appear as a whole. But then it's not supported for any IE version, and then support in other browsers being dropped in favor of the Web Animations API, which we're gonna be taking a look at today. Then we have like JavaScript animations, of course, like jQuery and stuff, and the pseudo class hover, which has been used for a number of years for doing like rudimentary animations. And it was until 2007 when the WebKit project announces the inclusion of CSS animations. So we have two types of animations on CSS3. One of them is like called what? Animations. And the other one is called transitions. Second. So the main difference, transitions is kind of, I don't know, maybe if I may call it syntactic sugar of what animations are. Unless you do like some basic animations and kind of animations that happen due to a change of state, like you hover to some element and you want to change the background or something. In order to make them, you kind of define what property you want to transition, define how long you want it to take, and set the beginning and ending values. A range of properties can be animated. There's a good site put together by Leah Vero, which kind of has all the list of all properties, CSS properties that you can animate, like background, height, width, etc. And if you hover to at any of those squares, it kind of let you see what you can do with it. So a quick demo, maybe something you've seen out there. It's a push button, and when you push it, it kind of goes down. The effect is kind of exaggerated, so you can actually see what happened. It's kind of slow. So if we take a look at the code, so basic styling, I'm just setting the top to 0, the background to some shade of gray, some shade of red. Haven't seen the picture, the movie, if you think about it. So if I can go back. That on the bottom is like a shadow. It says here, if you can see it, like 9 pixels. To the bottom, another shade of red, and then the transition is made by this. Wait, come closer. So basically, I'm telling it the property that I want to transition, which is like the top. I want to push it down and change the top value to 7 down there. And with the transition property, I can specify a range, number of properties. I can pass it as a comma separated values, like I'm doing here: top, background color, and box shadow. Or I can just pass the keyword all, and all of the properties that I change on that element will be transitioned. The benefit of using this approach is like you can come down here to the transition duration and actually specify a different duration to each one, like 1 second or whatever. And it's gonna give you more flexibility on what you can do. Then basically I'm doing on hover, just simple style. On hover I change the color, and then when it's active, I'm kind of pushing it down. So the real magic is these two properties. Animate these properties and take 0.3 seconds to do it. Very simple. Another property of transitions is like the transition delay, which lets you just delay the way the stuff is animated. As you can see on this nice red ball and stuff. Then another thing you can specify when dealing with transitions is the timing function, which is kind of the easing that you want the transition to take. The easing is kind of like how fast the animation starts and how fast it comes to an end. There are the range of easing functions you can pass to it, like ease, which is the default one, ease in out, ease in, ease out. Basically, ease, the first two is like, they kind of mean like start slow, then go to full speed, and then slowly come to a stop. The only difference between the two is how fast they accelerate and how fast they decelerate. Easy means start slow and come to abrupt full stop, and ease out is the opposite. Linear means like maintain a constant speed throughout the whole animation, and then QB Bezier is kind of an advanced one, which lets you control how fast the animation will start and how fast it will end. So you can pass any value to it and make different type of easings. So here's the demo of how easing works. So they all take about 3 seconds, I think, to finish. They all get to the end at the same time, but the way they get there is different. Maybe you can see, but the first two are ease and ease out. And if you notice, they both start and end slow, but how fast they get to full speed is what changes. Then the one in the middle is linear. Then the other one is in and is out, and some custom cubic Bezier put together. Maybe a better example is this one. So here you have is in and is out. You can notice that the first one starts slow and then comes up to an abrupt stop, and is out is the opposite. Here linear versus is. A lot of stuff you can do. So there are a couple of resources like this site put together by Andrew Sidnick, which is kind of a list of easings, different easings that you can use. And if you click on it, it will give you the keyword Bezier function for the one you clicked. Another good site is koivisto.com, put together by Leah Viewer. And basically you kind of move those two levers and you can build a different easing. And then this is the way Koivisto works. You kind of pass 4 values to it. 2 values means how fast it will accelerate, and the other 2 values means how fast it will come to a stop. And then the last side is kind of a mix between the last two, because you have like a list of all the easing functions that this guy has, Matthew Lin, and you have the levers too, so you can modify. This exaggerated effect is the one we were using before in the cubic Bezier. You have also events on the transitions. Well, it's not events, it's just one event. It's called transition end. So you can actually, it's handy, so you don't have to deal with setting up like timeouts and stuff. So only when the transition finished, and you can do some of the stuff with it. And it gives you back the property name and the elapsed time that has passed. And also, thing to notice that animations in general, they're not fully supported by all browsers. So you have to deal with these vendor prefixes. Like for instance, on these events, right here I have it called transition event, transition end. But the casing changes between vendors. Like some vendors would do camel case, some vendors would do lowercase. Then you have the WebKit transition end or the MOS transition end, and so on and so forth for each vendor. And same thing with the transitions and the others. Like you have WebKit transition property, WebKit transition duration and stuff. So the next type is CSS animations. It's kind of more complex than transitions. Basically on this one you define intermediate points using keyframes. So So you don't have just one starting point and end point. You can define points in between. You can do stuff like looping, play backwards, pause, and resume. So that stuff you can do with these ones. Maybe this diagram shows it better. So in transitions, you can kind of have like the start and end point. And let's say you changing the color of something from blue to red. You pass that to the browser, and the browser will, instead of abruptly change the color to red, it will apply like different shades of blue until it gets to red. It does it by automatically in the amount of time you tell it. But then on animations, you can define points in between and do stuff in each one. Basically, it's infinite number of points that you can define, because you can go up from 0 to 100%, and you can do 0.1% or something like that. Then this is a quick example of what you can do with animations. A lot more properties can be defined. Like, you pass it the animation name, and that name, we define it down there. We'll go back to it in a minute. The duration, the timing function is linear cubic here. The iteration count, which by default is 1, so the animation is going to be played once. Or you can pass all the number, or infinite if you wanted to like just keep going. The play state by default is running, but you can set it to pause. So this is a cool feature. Like, you can set the could come down here and set the the play state to paused on hover. Like a slideshow comes to mind. Like, you want it to be playing until someone puts the mouse on top and take a look at the picture. Then you have the fill mode, which by default is forwards, which means like go from 0 to 100. But you can set it to other values, and we're gonna go back to the second one after we take a look at the keyframes. And then you have the direction and the delay. The delay is if you wanted to start after a few seconds or something. And the direction, let's first take a look at the keyframes and then talk about the direction. So that animation name we had on top, the clouds passing by, is defined here. Using keyframes. So when you define keyframes, basically this is the easiest way to do it. You tell it the from and to points, and it will do something similar to transition, kind of the same as transition. So basically I'm telling it to first move 100 pixels to the left, and then all the way 400 pixels to the right. It's doable like in a nicely transition way. And then when I tell it to when I tell the animation field to backwards, that actually means to set the starting point of the object to the starting point of the keyframes. And that's handy because it gives you the kind of a fallback functionality, because we gotta deal with cross-browser compatibility issues. For example, it would be the same if I move this property to the actual class, like a start there. But then, let's say I want the user to always look at the class or whatever, that would mean that if the user is using a browser that doesn't support animations, this part would never execute, so the cloud would be hitting 150 pixels to the left or something like that. And then you can pass another value to it, like forwards. Forwards means kind of like when you finish the transition or the animation, don't go back to your initial state, because that's kind of the normal way animations work. Like you do something and then you go back to the previous state. But if you set it to forwards, it would remain at the state of the last keyframe. You can set it to both, and yeah, you can set it to normal, which is the default. Then the animation direction, by default, is forwards, like execute this keyframe first and then the keyframe last. But you can set it to like reverse, something like reverse. So if your animation is going to A to B and you set the play mode to the direction, to reverse, you're going to go from B to A. If you set it to alternate, it means that after you come from A to B, then go B to A, instead of going A to B, A to B, A to B. If you set it to alternate reverse one, it starts on B, then go to A, and then A to B, A to B, A to B. If we talk about animations, we gotta talk about CSS transforms. cool feature introduced on CSS3. Basically, this property can be transformed. Translate means moving an object left to right, top to bottom, and like closer to user. Rotate, self-explanatory. Scale, you can make an object bigger or smaller. Skew and matrix, which is just kind of a mix of the last four, of the other four. A matrix which you can actually pass like 6 values to it and do rotation, skewing, translating. Actually, transforms are also better to animate than regular properties because they kind of affect the elements as a whole. For instance, when you're changing like property on an object, let's say you're changing the height, the browser has to go and like recalculate the pixels, and if that object had childs, redrawing those childs and kind of calculated the position where they could gonna be. It's kind of an expensive operation, but if you're dealing with transforms, they kind of change the objects as a whole, and it's kind of the heavy work of pixel calculation stuff is passed from the browser to the GPU, which is very good at calculating pixels and stuff. So in theory, that's the way you should be. Like anything you can do with transforms through animations, better to transforms. So these are the properties that you can, a demo of the transforms This is skewing, scaling, rotating, and translating for them. And a quick demo on rotate. So I wanted to talk about rotate because another thing you can do with transforms is that you can change the origin. So for example, here these squares are rotating, rectangles. But you can, if you change the origin is always like in the center. But if you wanted to change it to something like top, right? It would, like the epicenter would be changed, and something like this will happen. Maybe you can. No, I don't think we're gonna be able to do that. Like instead of rotating from the middle, it would rotate like upwards or to down or downwards and stuff. And it actually gets more interesting when using perspective. So perspective kind of allows you to 3D position elements. It's kind of, think of perspective as like the imaginary lens through which we see the screens. It's kind of in photography what they call focal length. If you have a zoom lens, you can adjust the focal length and make objects look closer or farther away. So this is kind of the screen in the eye of the user. And if you change the Z value, the higher the value, the closer an object will appear to the user, and the smaller, the farther away would appear. And this is an example of what you can accomplish with perspective. But unfortunately, perspective is only supported on WebKit browsers. So for instance, if we open this on Firefox, for instance, which is not a WebKit browser, and take a look at this same example. Just a second. If I can find Firefox. So this is the difference. When I hover on it, it's like it doesn't. It stays there, so it's like flat, instead of coming forward, like these ones. So yeah, that's what you can do with perspective. If I can find it. Alright, so this is a more custom example of keyframes. Kind of similar to the other one, but then if we can take a look at the way the keyframes are defined. So instead of defining like a from and 2 points, you can define points in the middle, like 0%, 50%, 100%. It's depends on what you want to accomplish. Like here, I have this kind of pulse effect. It's basically a simple effect. I just scale it down, scaling up, and then scale it down, and change the opacity a little bit in between. And then the same properties we're raising: the animation name, duration, and iteration count. And as a lot of properties in CSS, there is a shorthand on animations. So you could do like, instead of defining each one independently, like name, duration, iteration, you could do just animation and pass the string to it. Pass the values to it, like the animation name, the duration, delay, and so on and so forth. This is an example of type of animation. These are called sprite animations, which most of the times are looked using like images like this one. Basically, it's a simple animation. You basically have a picture with all the states of the object, and then you basically like showing the part of the picture that you wanted to show. And here I have a picture with I think 15 cans or something like that. Yeah, 15. And then you tell it the background image that you want to use, the height and width of each frame in the image that you want to show. And then I'm using a shorthand here for animation. Basically, I have this animation called shoryuken, which defines the keyframe. Then for using this type of animations, as a easing function, you pass the step function. So steps means, so basically the number of steps is the number of images you have, the number of frames you have in the image. And the second parameter of steps is this is a complicated one. So basically, it means if the default is end, but you can pass star to it. The difference is like if you pass star to it, the animation will start on the second frame, and if you pass end, it will start on the first frame. It depends on really what you want to accomplish. And then normal, which is the direction, the fill mode, the delay, and the iteration count. So yeah, but there's another cool thing we can do with sprites. Just refresh page. So we can simulate like typing, like someone typing on the screen. And this is the same effect. Using the same technique. It's just animating with sprites. Instead of like for steps, instead of passing the number of frames, I pass the number of letters that I have, because it's not an image, something. But then it's the same effect, and you can like, if you want people to really like write something, you can do something like that and kind of freak people out. This thing. Then we have also events on the animations, and it's more flexible because we have the start, iteration, and animation end. On transitions, we just have the transition end. And basically the same thing. You can attach to those events, like you get the element that you are animating, we attach the event, and you pass a function to it as an event handler. And the same thing, you have to deal with vendor prefixes. Like instead of animation starts, you would use WebKit animation starts. And there are polyfills out there to help you out with those vendor prefixes. Then, maybe we can. Yeah, so another cool thing we could do is SVG path drawing. It's maybe something you don't see often, but it's out there if you want to use it. Maybe you can see this. It's kind of simple. Like if we were to have this simple SVG, well, this is the path property. What we do with it is, just a second. So when you define a path property on an SVG, you can define the dash array to it, and what the dash array means is like if you pass something other than 0 to it, means that you're gonna have like a dashed line instead of a continuous line, and then you pass two values to it. The first one means like how thick are the lines, and the second one how long. I mean how long are the lines, and the second one is how long is the space between the lines, between the dots, and then you pass the dash offset property, which is kind of a where to start drawing the line. And then if you set these properties to the length of the whole of the whole SVG, I mean the whole path, and then you use transitions, as we just learned how to use. Where's the mouse? So basically, it's doing the same thing but with JavaScript. Like I'm just basically changing those two properties, the dash array and the dash offset of the path, passing a transition to it, like animate this property 2 seconds with an ease, and then I set it to 0, and that would do the effect. Maybe it's not too visible. It looks more difficult than it actually is. Then the benefits or strengths of using animations. Well, they render faster most of the times. They render faster than their JavaScript counterparts. They benefit from hardware accelerations because they're processed by the GPU. They're battery efficient because of that. They're easy to work with. Like it's just CSS. You don't have to learn another technology or download another plugin or something like that. And they use the request animation frame, and that's one of the main reasons. Because the bulk of the work is handled internally by the browser. The request animation frame, think of it as kind of a way of the browser of keeping track of what frames or pixels are being painted and repainted, and like knowing when to draw stuff. For instance, when let's say you're dealing with doing some animation with something with JavaScript. Let's say you set a timeout and you want to change the opacity on some object. And you set a timeout, and every 10 milliseconds or something you decrease the opacity or something like that. That would work, but then the problem with those ones is that well, the advantage of the request animation frame is that the request animation frame wouldn't do an animation if the user is not taking a look at it. For instance, when you have a timeout, the timeout just runs, but if the user is on another tab or have the browser minimized, or maybe the stuff that you're animating is not in the viewport at that specific moment, that job that the browser is doing is the user is not actually seeing. But then what the request animation frame would do is that if the object is not in the viewport, it won't animate it, or if the browser is minimized or something. And then like it would do the animation when it's ready to do it, not when you tell it to. Because for instance, you use JavaScript, you tell it to animate something, it's gonna try to do it now, and if it's busy doing something else, then it's gonna become like, I don't know, slow, and it's gonna render slowly or something like that. And then there's this thing about like how many frames per second can handle the browser. Most browsers would handle like 60 frames per second, and if you try to do something at like 100 frames per second, 40 of them become like drop frames, what they call, because you're doing them, but nobody's noticing them because the browser can't handle them. And then most screens would handle up to 60 frames per second anyway. And then some tools available to you for doing animations. We have like reveal animations. Maybe if we take a look at them, at some examples. If I can find them. So basically, reveal animations is a JavaScript library which lets you like show stuff whenever they come to viewport. Maybe you could do that on your own CSS3, but then there's a library to help you out. Animate.css, a famous library, which is kind of this guy Dan Ehring put together a bunch of nice animations, subtle animations that you can use on your site, and you can just reference them and apply it to objects. And this is kind of an easy way to start up. Like you can download a library like this and take a look at how they're done and use them as a starting point. Like so, it's always easier to take a look at like do something like that than starting animation from scratch. One page scroll, it's like let's you like do one of those like assisted scroll things. Use it as your own risk, because many people don't like their scroll to be hijacked. And you can do also that some keyboard bindings and stuff. So if we take a look at some of the examples, maybe the reveal one first. Let's see if you noticed. So something had to come up when we go to get to the bottom. Yeah, there you go. So since we're here, we can take a look at animate CSS. So for instance, let's take this same one. We can do it on the fly. So the way it works is you pass the animated class to it, right? And then one of the animations they have like 20 or 25. Let's say, I see. Oh, whoops. Or maybe animated that CSS is not on the page. Alright, yeah, I forgot there's no intern here. Alright, well, the next sample. The scroll hijacking. Like if you just try to go down a little, it will just show the whole page. It looks nice because it gives you this button on the right side. You can click on it and you will go to the next page and stuff. I don't know, some people don't like that, so use it as your own risk. And then let's go back. So that's it for today. Thank you all for coming, and if you got any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
We've got about 5 minutes for questions. If anybody has any, yep.
You know the thing you had with the character. Did you say there was 15 different images in that?
No, the Shoryuken one was 15.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, I can show you the image.
Show me the images.
So yeah, I have 15 different games, and basically I tell it first, show me this stuff. Oh, I can maybe talk about the second parameter of the step. So basically I just tell it to show me this, show me this, show me this. and it looks kind of a cartoon, animated cartoon stuff. So on the step thing, you pass the number of keynes that you have. So I got 15. And if you pass as a second parameter, the start keyword, it would start showing you this one. If you pass end, it would show you this one. Depends on really what you want to try to accomplish. Sometimes you want to have this one show you, some other time this one. And the character thing is actually, it's a trick. Like you have the characters are written, right? And you have like an invisible, like a span tag on top of it, with the same color as the background. And then you kind of moving that to the right. And you kind of and then you have like a border left with a different color, let's say white. And you have that like transition blinking, right? So it gives the appealing of the cursor. Then you move that to the right, and it makes you think that someone's actually writing. Next, you have a question?
Yeah, how do you bind an event? For instance, press on your on the red button to transition from one picture to the next. That's a very common effect. I know how to do it in jQuery, but how would you do that in CSS3?
Well, you mean like trigger the actual animation through JavaScript?
Yep.
You can actually do that. Yeah, I didn't talk about it, but you can actually. But the thing is, it's not fully. It's something that it's not so supported. But they came up with this. So they coming up with this what they call the Web Animations API, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have an animation create object to it, and you can do kind of bar element equals new animation element, animation object, and you pass it to the animation object like the animation name which you had defined in CSS, and then in the object that you want to apply to it, and then it gives you back a function. That constructor gives you back a function, and you kind of call init on it, and that would trigger the animation. It sounds more difficult than it is, actually.
Yeah, like very often, it looks very easy when you show it, and when it comes to doing it.
You can with the Web Animations API, you can do something like bar anim equals new. I don't remember what right the syntax, but it's kind of animation create, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here you pass the animation name that you had defined on your CSS, the object that you want to apply that animation to, and then you call to that. Come down here, and you call anim.init, and that will trigger the animation. Another thing you can do is like now you would be able to access the request animation frame from here on JavaScript. Again, it's not fully supported, so use it at your own risk. So you can do something like window that request frame, and it works the same way as kind of the timeout function works. So you pass a function to it, and it would execute. If you have a browser that supports 60 frames per second, this function will execute 6 times. And the way you use this is the way you have this. Like this animation I had for the beginning of the presentation, and I'm kind of using a timeout, right, to animate like each property. I'm animating the path or something, right? So instead of passing all this to a timeout and executing that like as many times as you want, I would pass the same function to the request animation frame. And instead of me telling it, do this like 10 times per second or so, 100 times per second, the request animation frame would do it for me. And I don't have to pass, like here, I'm passing a delay to the timeout. I don't have to pass a delay, because the delay would be like 60 frames per second or less if he thinks it's less. So yeah, that's the way it's done.
Okay,
Question?
well, thanks very much, Wilson.